So I am principal and owner at Michael Graves Architecture and Design. My background is in product design, and I'm excited to share some of what we do with you today. When Jim called up and asked if I had something I could share, I said, I don't know, it just came out. I'd have to call and see if I could get a sample. And they rushed me a product overnight. So I'm excited to do that. I'm gonna start sharing my screen with everyone, so hang tight. And the PowerPoint will be short, but you know what we're gonna sort of go through today, just to give a little bit of background. For those of you who aren't familiar with who Michael Graves is, you know, as Laate said, originally an architect. He passed away in 2015. And just a really unique person from the standpoint that most designers or architects would love to be associated with a movement in their life. You know, it'd be in the history books for something. Michael is associated with at least three. One was his modern architecture in his very early career. But then after touring Rome, it opened his eyes to sort of the world, and he started to piece that together over the next couple of decades. Until the sort of postmodern movement came around. And that's where Michael really found his voice as an architect. Not that he necessarily prescribed to postmodernism, but more of this idea of figurative architecture and design that could tell a story, and design that really reflected the context of the place and really spoke to how people should use it. So our firm does architecture. We do interior design all over the world. And then there's the work that I get to work on, which is the product design. And we don't specialize. What we specialize in is design excellence, is what we like to say. So whether it's household fixtures, household furnishings, or even healthcare, or you know, personal accessories, we tend to do it all, as well as graphic design and branding. So, and there's me with the man. Years ago in his studio. So I guess what I wanted to take you through today, you know, the theme of our work is it all starts with a question. Whether it's a question that we ask, or whether it's a question that one of our clients comes to us with. And that's the example that I'm going to use today. And, you know, just we were approached by a company. They're actually a local company. I'm just across the border in PA, and there's a PA company, Barbecue Guru. And in 2003, they invented this space of barbecue temperature control. So they allow you to sort of connect a fan to your smoker or barbecue pit and use a circuit board, basically at its most rudimentary, what it's doing, to pump in air to make the coals burn hotter if the temperature is going down, or close the vent and cut off the air if it's getting too hot. So it basically allows barbecue pit masters to run their pit like an oven. And so they created this whole product industry of these controls, but now they've got competition. Now other people are making them. But what are they making? They're making this stuff. So what's interesting is it all looks like tech out of the 80s, right? Like some of these things look like pagers. Some of them look like, you know, old, you know, pre-Nintendo Game Boy systems. And, you know, this is the space that they're working in. A lot of them are making it domestically. And so they're kind of limited, and it's a niche market. It's not a huge volume. So you don't have the same luxuries that maybe some larger manufacturers like Google and Apple have, where they can see a glass surface on every phone. This isn't that. But it's a similar case for us always, you know, whether it's a client who comes to us because he wants a better solution for composting stuff on their garbage, on their countertop, or whether a client says, hey, did you know that wheelchairs, you know, 30% of them are stolen from hospitals every year? The US Open came to us and said, you know what, our courtside furniture is sort of a mess, and we want to clean it up and we want to make it more iconic. even to the fact where when Michael Graves first became paralyzed, you know, he was in this facility that was, you know, one of the best in the world, but look at his surroundings. And one of his great quotes from being there was, it's too ugly to die here. And so all of these ideas start with a question. And, you know, I get asked a lot about innovation. You know, innovation is a buzzword that we hear constantly today. And of course we do. You know, it's what everyone wants because it impacts your bottom line. But perhaps you don't know how best to go about doing it, or you want to know how to do it better. And that's why companies like ours exist. For over 50 years, you know, we've innovated at all scales across incredibly diverse circumstances. And we specialize in tackling those tricky problems, no matter what the constraints may be. I like to think that we specialize in identifying opportunities and making solutions real. And so how do we do it? So, you know, a lot of people are glad to share their proven process for innovating. You know, you can go online, you can Google it. How do I innovate? You know, and you can come up with things like 21 great ways to innovate. If you want to innovate, learn these 9 rules. Everyone seems to be looking for that clear, simple path to success. But while the path to success can go in many directions, it's never clear and it's never simple. And in our consultancy, no project is ever the same. And because of this, we always tailor the design process to fit the project. And despite this custom approach, there are some foundational ideas present in what we do every day. And I would say at the heart of it, it's this. It's make it meaningful. Innovation is about so much more than making something new or different or better. Successful innovation, we've found, is about making something meaningful. And I want to share with you all, you know, as we dive into that, we have a design philosophy. You know, Michael is no longer with us physically, but how we went about doing things when he was with us is still the way in which we go about doing it. And it comes down to sort of 4 pillars for us, the 4 Ps. And it's about purpose, it's about personality. And think about those 2 for a second, right? Like everybody loves to talk about form and function when it comes to design. We like to take that a little bit deeper. And, you know, nobody really says, what's your function in life? It's more about what's your purpose. Purpose is a little bit of a deeper idea to us. And same with form versus personality. Like a form can be attractive, but a personality is memorable. And then we balance that with the ideas of perspective and passion. Perspective is all about context. And underneath these, we have sort of sub-principles that go with it. So perspective is about context. It's about being human-centered. It's about making things that are accessible. And then passion is really about exceeding expectations. That's our #1 rule. You know, what are the expectations? How can we exceed those? Pioneer and explore is a big one. And then just responsibility, thinking about stuff. So I'm going to switch gears, and I'm just going to switch back to me for a moment, and I'm going to switch to another file. And I'm going to take you guys through actually a client presentation for this product, which is not something we typically do. So I'm excited to kind of give you a little bit of a behind the scenes look at what we typically do. If I can get it to go back to the first page. All right. So here we go. So Barbecue Guru. So they approached us with their little device that is really market leader. Everybody loves this product, but they wanted to tie it together. They had 3 different units, and all 3 looked very different because they all sort of grew out of a different time in the company. And they all did something a little bit different than the other. So, you know, we go through, we outline, you know, what are our objectives? What's the scope of work? We have this idea when we design objects. We call it the 10-3-1 rule. and it stands for 10 feet, 3 feet, 1 foot. So we try to design to these different distances. So when something is 10 feet away, you really only get the bold move. You know, you get that sort of main composition. What's that thing that's going to attract you to it and draw you in and entice you to get to the 3 foot distance? And then at 3 feet is when certain details like the materials or patterns or textures start to emerge. You know, now you've got somebody, now you need to reveal more that really makes them want to reach out and touch it. And that's designing to the one. And then, so then when people are touching it and interacting with it, how is that experience? So we try and think about all of those layers when you're thinking about designing a product. So typically when we present a new design, we key it up with talking about personality. And when we design, as part of our process, all of these ideas are just flowing through us, all of these things that we've seen. We're connecting sort of different things, whether it's a car, whether it's a camera, all of these get baked into sort of where we're going and how we're thinking about the world. And, you know, so this was the one that we presented to them because in our consultancy, we often design for other clients' brands. You know, so this isn't a Michael Graves product, this is a Barbecue Guru product. And we had to really piece together what we thought that meant. And when we're going to show a design, we also want people to sort of have that background of where that design came from. So I'm going to show you the concept that didn't get chosen, and we'll go through it really quickly. But this is the one that didn't get chosen. But we really loved how, you know, we had this brushed stainless steel detail that was wrapping around. And for the context, knowing that that's one of our principles, for the context, this is something that mounts near your grill, and you're going to see that in a slide or so. But what we did was this fun angled cut where all of these probes would go in, and we sort of looked at that cut similar to like when you cut into good barbecue and you have this pink smoke ring on the meat around it. So there was this really fun sort of nod to that idea. And then we had these little beacons on the side that was communicating, you know, the status of your cook, and a really bright, large display telling you what the temperature was from far away. And this is what it would look like on your smoker. So that's the one that didn't get chosen. So let's talk about what did get chosen. And this gets to the heart of how we design, and something that even when I teach at Princeton, what I you know, drive into the students, and if any of them are watching them, they can say whether this is true or not. But there was a barbecue festival in Atlantic City that was just like a week after we kicked off our project, and they invited us to come down. So they had all these sort of local barbecue teams there cooking, and it was springtime, but we had this sort of freak like snowstorm of a day. So my partner and I are like wandering around out here where all the professional like cooks are cooking. And what you can maybe see at the very center of this picture is this little red digital display, this little beacon. And that was something that when the client kicked this off, they said, you know, this is what people love about us. They love that this display is so bright that you can see it even in the daylight. And it was true. When we walked around, we could, just from that little digital display, tell who was using a Barbecue Guru product and who wasn't. But at the same time, you're always sort of asking your question, like, how could it be better? How could we take that and make it more of a branded element? How could we make it work better for the client? And you also sort of see the smokers that the professionals use. They're more of like a box, right? With a door on the front. And what people are doing are running these cables with a temperature probe into their pit and into the meat, and it's all coming back to this unit and reading out the display. So we had all of these ideas floating around our head, right? Like the pit and the probe, which kind of looks like a Q, and this is barbecue. So we're like, how can we make that Q work for us? We're also thinking about, what does this object do? You know, it's communicating. One of the things that we sort of have a hard time with seeing in the world of consumer electronics is like the oversimplification of things. You know, pretty soon we're all going to be like overrun, our houses will be overrun by an assortment of cylinders on our counters that, you know, some we wave to and some we speak to, and, you know, some are just listening to us, and we're not really sure what all these cylinders do, but they all look really clean and simple. So we wanted to come up with a form, and we love this idea of communication, and we're thinking like a word bubble, and then just the product itself, like the meat. You know, when you think of like a cut of meat, you sort of get a similar shape to that word bubble. So we wanted to figure out how to make all of that work for us. So we came up with this form that blended all of that together, and we made the digital display bigger, bolder, but then we put this light ring around it and turned it into that, because from a branding standpoint, all of their products names end with a Q. FiberQ, DigiQ, PartyQ. We're like, well, let's own the Q. So, you know, for us, it's always, you know, the branding and all of that is like rolled into one. And so we came up with this really fun shape. All of the probes would plug in along the bottom. And what is great is it takes this moment and turns it into this moment. So now, not only can you see the information, now I can actually read that it says 250, but I also get this branded ring going around it. And so this is what we presented. They loved it, unanimously chose this design. You know, we showed how it was. And part of the scope was, you know, that they have these three products. And it was at this point that they said, you know, I think we could fit all of the internals into one, you know, we could pick one size and make it work for us. So a lot of conversation ensued about, do we still need 3 SKUs? Could we make it work as 2 different SKUs? And ultimately, that's the path that they went. They eliminated 1 SKU, they simplified it. So now they offer 2 different products, and they all use the same size housing. But for us, it was sort of going back to the drawing board. But before I go to that, like, we also laid out how this would work. So the ring would shine blue if it was below temperature, and it would just glow red if it was at the set temperature, and if it was above, it would start flashing. So even if you were too far away to read the numbers, the color alone would help tell the story. And then, because this can have up to 4 different temperature probes in it, we made the little tail of the Q work for us as well. And if you have multiple probes plugged in, it'll cycle colors as it goes through it. And so now, from far away, you know which temperature it's broadcasting to you, whether, you know, red is for pit, yellow and green and blue are for different food probes. So it was a really fun idea, and they love that. And so now I'm going to show you, you know, what comes next in that process for us is specifications. And, you know, this is, again, not usually something only our clients see, but this is what we do before something goes off to a factory to be made. You know, you really have to think through all of the subtleties of the details. You can see that this got smaller, it got simplified. You know, we're working with budget parameters, and we're calling out all of the colors, we're calling out all of the functionality on here. Every single thing is spelled out. So when it goes to a manufacturer who, even though we've been intimately familiar with this object for months at this point, they are seeing it for the first time. So they need to be walked through it and understand what it is, what it does. So we lay out just the overall dimension, and we're providing 3-dimensional CAD to go along with it. But when you open up a CAD file, you know, nothing tells you what it does or what texture it should be, or, you know, what its function is, what its purpose is. So we put this document together that's really sort of a user experience guide, you know, that when it's not plugged in, it's not lit up. When you do plug it in, here's the series that it goes through, and we just spell out in detail all of these things. You press this button, this happens. You press these buttons, this happens. So we go through that in great detail of how that all works and whether there's an audible chime. So you can see, like, there's a lot to this very simple, humble object. And then we lay out all of the artwork so that they have that. So that's what we get to do, and it's a lot of fun. And then, like Jim said, so we actually got the product sample in. So and I realized I should not be wearing a dark shirt because it's maybe hard for you guys to see this. But you know, they did a lot of work on getting the glow to work, so it lights up, and you know, the display is there. So it's really it was a successful item, and now it's flashing because it's like, hey, something's wrong because I don't have anything else plugged into it. So that is the new Ultra Q from Barbecue Guru. So if any of you are barbecue fans out there and you want to take your barbecue game to the next level, you got to check them out because they make a great product. So that is trying to keep it to 20 minutes. Maybe I went a little long.
I think that was really great. Thank you, Rob. That was very, you know, illustrative of how you take, you know, from idea to design, and obviously they were happy with it. That was really, I didn't think it was going to be that cool, but I'm really impressed with all the thought that went behind it and the different ways to signal and communicate, which is really important. You know, as you say. When people are busy and not necessarily near the grill, but want to see how the temperature is.
Yeah.
But I know there's probably a bunch of questions, and I'll hand it over. But before we go to questions, I just thought, why don't you share just one thing about design that is important to all people who are launching new products?
Yeah, I would say that the most important thing is that people need to be passionate about the idea themselves and really believe in it and have really like thought through all of the details. So, you know, they just know it inside and out. But then you need to pair that with the fact that other people need to love it too. And you need to be able to communicate that to other people. Because if it's something that just you love and nobody else gets it, then it's not really a scalable idea, you know, and it might be a great solution for you personally. But what we have to do is we sweat over all of these details and we immerse ourselves in this sort of world, you know, like I'm not a barbecue expert, but we immersed ourselves in it and we talk to people and we find out what they love about it so that when we are coming up with details that we love, we can then go communicate it to others. And when we see the same reaction or even like a better reaction, like then you know you're onto something. And that was something that Michael was always adamant about. You know, first and foremost, we should like it. You know, if you're designing something for someone else and you're not into it, something's wrong. You know, it's not really there yet. So that's the thing about design in how it differs from art is that, you know, with design, you're really looking to a broader audience. And you're really looking to find this common thread that connects people to a similar idea and gets them all excited about it and helps all of them and makes all of their lives better.
Great, thanks, Rob. Before we answer the first question that's submitted, Latte, did you have any questions for Rob?
Well, I'm a total design process nerd, so I'm super curious about, you know, how many people were involved, like how you kicked the project off, was, you know, how long the project took. I'm just kind of always curious about those little wonderful details because, you know, it's to see the final thing. I know that it takes a lot. You're basically whittling away a lot of decisions, right? And cutting through all of that to get to your answer. So, you know, starting point, end point, how many people were involved? What kind of people were involved? I'm always curious.
So, yeah, so from our side, really, this was a two-person project. And at the kickoff, you know, we always look to make sure we do a kickoff. And these are hard times because we can't do anything in person. We just had a huge presentation today that we had to do digitally. And as you can imagine, it just wasn't as good as being able to talk to people face to face in person. But we get all of the stakeholders you know, everybody who's going to be working on this going forward until the day that it comes out should be at that meeting. So we have engineering, we have marketing, we have the folks in operations, the company owner, the sort of vice president who's like a big, you know, force in the company, a big personality in the company, like everybody there. And we are prompting with questions, and we're doing a lot of listening. And we're just hearing how they talk about it, because when you give people the stage to discuss, you know, what they're already really passionate about, you know, they tell you the stuff they love about it, they tell you the stuff they hate about it, the things they wish they could do better, different, what they love about competition, what they love about other industries. And so it's really, you're just like a sponge at the beginning, and you're taking all of that in. You know, I think it's a contrary thought to maybe perception about design, that a designer is just going to come in and be like, I'm going to tell you what you need and how it's going to be. You know, for us, it always starts with listening and getting to know people. And then you kind of have them sitting on your shoulder throughout, and you're like, well, what, you know, what would Bob say about this? And so for us, it was a pretty quick, I think we maybe spent a month on this, you know, and that's with some other things going on at the same time. And then another month of revision when we were done. And then this was sort of one of those jobs where it was a handoff, and, you know, kept checking in periodically. How's it going? How's it going? Until one day they're like, it launched. You know, in other instances, we'll work with people all the way up until the product gets to market, you know, talking to the factories, visiting factories, working on packaging, you know, so it differs. Like I said at the beginning, we always tailor our approach, but I would say universally, it always starts with listening to the client and then getting in touch with the users.
Great, thank you for that, Rob. And we usually do a 7th inning stretch, but since this is a happy hour, I'm just going to show off what I'm drinking. This is Clyde Mays, Clyde Mays bourbon. I don't know if everyone can see it, Clyde Mays. And I just learned about this bourbon recently. Cheers, Quarantini.
Cheers, man.
Yeah.
So let's take our first question now that we've had a sip. Rob, here's one question about, you know, the breakdown of the percentage of input from each of the parties or stakeholders, right? So what was the percentage from Michael Graves? What was the percentage from the client? And what was the percentage from the potential users?
That's a good question. I think that would be a hard thing to sort of put a percentage on. I think it's a pretty, you know what, it depends on, every client's different. You know, we definitely have some folks who lean back and say, you know, show me, tell me. But more so, I think when you do it right and you do it well, you engage who you're working with. You know, and I also like to think about our clients as more partners. You know, like client feels very transactional. You know, partners is like you are in a shared situation together and you're going through it together, and it implies give and take on both sides. So, you know, with these partners, I would say it's sort of a 50-50, you know, like we're doing a bunch of work, but make no mistake, they live, breathe, sleep, you know, this is their business. So they're just as passionate about it. So when you do it right and you provide these sort of designs, it sparks all of these great conversations, all of these sort of great debates about like, well, should it be this, or maybe we could do that with it. So it's always this fine line of giving them something finished enough to get them like super excited about what it could be, but then leaving the door open for them to jump in and make it better and say, I love it, but could it also do this? Could we have it maybe do that? So it's a real fun, so I would say 50-50.
Okay, great. As we wait for other questions, I wanted to just ask you, Rob, about Michael Graves. You know, you guys, I think people don't realize, you know, all the things you do. I mean, we're really lucky to have such a treasure, in Jersey and Princeton. But you guys have done such architectural work that is really phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And can you just highlight that for just a quick second? Some of the other things that people might not know about Michael Graves.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of starts with, I think Michael as an individual was just fascinating human being. There's a great book that came out after he passed away. It was meant to be a sort of autobiography originally, but then he passed away during sort of the writing of it, so it changed course a little bit. But Michael taught architecture at Princeton University for 39 years, and he was incredibly sort of scholarly about design and the world. And so that was well, I guess two of the most kind of like eye-opening things for me when I first hospital bed, having become recently paralyzed. So that's a very strange position to meet your boss for the first time. But then the second thing was just how he didn't fit the mold of what I expected of someone who, typically gets hit with the label of starchitect. While he could be very passionate about his beliefs on design, he was always willing to like bring you along. And I think that's the spirit that goes through all of the work that we continue to do, is that we're not looking to have a conversation above people's heads. And I think that's why, when I mentioned that Michael was known for three movements, one was the modern architecture, the other was postmodern architecture, the third was the democratization of design and being Target's first external design partner. And that kicked off in 1999 and ran for 13 plus years. And we brought thousands of different products to market. And it was the first time that a designer had partnered with a mass market entity and agreed to say that like great design should be affordable. Even though, Laate, you held up your tea kettle at the beginning of this, which I also have on my stove. My signed one is in a glass case, but and when he signed mine, I heard him say "oops." So I think he messed up. But it's really cool to see, and like Michael's work is all around the world. In Japan, in Egypt, in European Union, it's like woven into the fabric of the world. A lot of people think about buildings like the dolphin and the swan at Disney, and they're like, oh, and it's like, but what they don't understand is that was designed for Disney, and it's Disney. Like Disney is over the top. It's about entertainment. In fact, that work coins the phrase entertainment architecture. And when you learn the background even of those buildings, that it was all about channeling. So every resort at Disney is themed, right? If you've ever gone to Disney, you understand that. Like everything sort of has its theme. And people are like, well, what's the theme of the swan and the dolphin? So nobody really knows. The theme is the Renaissance, and it's art and it's sculpture. And that's why it has those huge sculptures of the swan and the dolphin on top. And that's why the walls are painted. It was just this real, like they worked to channel the Renaissance into a Disney format, which is kind of mind blowing, but it's a fascinating project. And, you have the Denver Public Library is this beautiful space, and the architects continue to do work for people all around the world. And, while there is some vernacular that's common here and there in the buildings, they always come to jobs like all the stuff in Egypt. They worked to utilize local craftsmen, local building methods, and really channeling some of the shapes of the local buildings into the vernacular of the site. So it's really cool to see that same philosophy play out from these huge scale projects, like the largest statue in the world that just got built in India. Our architects were the design architects for that project, down to like we're doing courtscape furniture, the umpire stand and players benches for the US Open tennis tournament. And, you know, all of that's coming out of like one office that all was, you know, sort of born out of one man's like drive to, you know, see better design in the world. So it was really cool.
Actually, Jim, do you want to field this question? It's a good one. Well, actually, there's a statement first, which was, "I'm jealous about the bourbon," which is a totally fair statement. You made me go and grab a little bit of whiskey. It pales in comparison to what you have, though, I think, Jim. But Jim, do you want to grab that question? Then I have a whole bunch of questions for Rob.
Sure. So the question is, how many prototypes and iterations do you on average go through from physical form tests to 2D concept sketches on any given project? I know there were likely more than 2 for the barbecue guru, but can you give us some insights there?
So I think like anything that varies. You know, on this particular project, it was a lot more of the exploration was done just through traditional 2D sketching. Although non-traditional, because I find that I use the iPad more and more these days. I give a solid, you know, support for Procreate, which is a great app on the iPad and has sort of totally changed how I love to draw. And so we went through a lot of iterations, because typically if something is of this scale, you get a sense of it on paper or on a digital screen a lot better than, say, the transport chair that we did for Stryker Medical. That is like it's a hospital specific wheelchair. And for that, we did probably over 100 like built prototypes. And they varied greatly to the point where like Stryker rented offsite storage units to house all of the prototypes.
Wow.
And those went from like things that we would make here in Princeton out of 2x4s and MDF, you know, medium density fiberboard, you know, that we were just like testing out ideas, to their much more elegant and refined and robust welded units that we would take out for consumer preference testing. But it's an interesting question, because I see a lot of like posts these days on LinkedIn and other sites where, you know, people, it almost seems to be like a bragging rights on how many prototypes you made. But I feel like you have to be careful, you know, like at a certain point when you're like after hundreds of prototypes, and it's like, did it take you that many tries to get to that? You know, so there's a little bit of, you know, more isn't always necessarily better. But at the same time, like I am now entering I just finished my 17th year of doing this at Michael Graves. And I would say that, you know, after 5 years of doing it, something just clicked. And, you know, it became a little bit more effortless. You start to find the answers a little bit quicker. You kind of make your way through the fog a little bit faster. And, you know, to the point now, it's like almost like a junkie. You're trying to find like a new project that's totally different, just to challenge yourself into like, oh, I've never, you know, like we've never done barbecue controls before. Let's do that. That's really fun and exciting and something new to learn about. So I think that's just a reflection on me and my personality and my ADD.
Well, and you're also hitting like you hit your 10,000 hours at that point in time, right? And so you started to hit your
many times over.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it actually brings up a bunch of questions around, you know, so a lot of the people that participate in this meetup are really passionate about the idea of either invention or making. You know, obviously we've done a lot of things with maker spaces. So you were mentioning actually before we opened it up to everybody, you were mentioning how you've gone a bit virtual. You had actually gone a bit virtual before this as a team.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 3 dimensions. We're talking about prototype testing and the development of things that you were saying that you're using your iPad with Procreate. But when you get to that physical need to make something, even if it's at a lower fidelity, so what are you doing out of your home or your home studio or whatever form that is? I'm assuming it's not just like, Scotch tape and, underwear.
No, yeah. So I was telling Laate before we started this. So I mainly work remote now, but I'm fortunate enough that the workshop that I have in my basement is beyond the workshop that we had in the basement of our office studio. So I have a bandsaw, table saw, drill press, sander. I have a desktop CNC machine. I have a 3D printer, and a bunch of other handheld things to basically heat and beat anything I need to together. But like we just launched, or we were going to before the Houseware show got canceled, but we just designed some. So like on the complete opposite side of the spectrum from this, makeup storage, like countertop makeup storage for Polder, which is a housewares brand. And for that, we started sketching, but like for that one, prototyping was so important.
Yeah.
And like we just start with paper, like cutting paper. That's like, going back to that prototype question, while I might take issue with people who brag about doing too many prototypes, you do have to do prototypes. You do have to make stuff. And I think that's the other thing that so many people struggle with, is that sort of bias towards action. And it's just sometimes it can be fun to stay in the sort of headspace of sketching and just like, I'm going to do another drawing. Oh, what else could it look like? But at some point, making it physical brings out so many other questions that you need to answer that a drawing can just gloss over with a line.
Yeah.
You're like, and something connects there. And it's like, well, make it and see how that's impossible, or happy accidents happen along the way. So for that, paper and foam core at the beginning, and then we jump into like put something into CAD and 3D print it. So we always get like as physical as possible with the product, and sometimes it's like you can show the early concepts, but then the next step is to get into the physical ones and make sure, like, see which one has the most merit once you see it in 3s and Ds.
That's awesome. And that's a wonderful way of kind of breaking down your process now, right? So you also were saying that you teach at Princeton University, and I'm curious, where are the students in their development, in their evolution as designers or architects, or you name it?
So the interesting thing is, so what I teach at Princeton is really design thinking. Okay. And it's part of the Keller Center, which the Keller Center's mission is all around innovation and entrepreneurship. It's housed within the engineering school. Princeton has no design school. They have an architecture school, they have an engineering school. And what is fascinating is that, others who are better and before me have sort of grown this design thinking curriculum, but they do it through Princeton's mission, which is really societally focused. And like, that's what I love, is now that I get to spend some time working with students who are coming from all different schools within Princeton. The Keller Center has like 1,400 students taking classes on entrepreneurship or design thinking in any given year, from sociology, history, English, like you name it. So we get these teams of students who are not designers, who we are walking through the design thinking process. But my course is a continuation of a program that's called the Tiger Challenge. And the Tiger Challenge is this really amazing sort of summer internship that Princeton does, where students get put into a team and they get this really wicked problem to tackle, like the sort of indignities of third-party debt collection, local farmers and how to like make their food more accessible to people locally, access to special education resources, tackling the opioid epidemic. So like these are things that even, you know, I are like, ooh, that's a tricky problem. I don't know necessarily how to go about doing that. But we get to walk them through. And so my course focuses on ideation and prototyping. So it's exciting because like prototyping for me, typically in the world of like, you know, physical objects is like, I'm going to go make something. But prototyping and design thinking is more about user experience. And it's more about services and interactions, which is also a huge part of what we do and bake into all of the work that we do. So it's exciting to take students through that, and also encourage them to be more visual with their thinking and the power of, you know, putting your thoughts out there into the world. Although now that we are in a virtual world, switching things over to like tools online like Mural is what we're using now. I know there's other things like Miro and Microsoft Whiteboard, but it's actually interesting to see these digital whiteboard tools coming along that allow you to really collaborate across distances and do it in a really visual way that even, you know, face-to-face doesn't always do. So
what was the name of that? What was the name of that tool, Rob? The Mural? Did you say?
Mural, yeah, you know, like a mural on a wall.
Yeah.
So it's
cool.
MuralDoc.co is the website, and it's great. They've got all sorts of frameworks in it, you know, from empathy maps and business model canvases and all that stuff to just, you know, blank. And you can insert images, you can put Post-its in there, you can draw in there. It's a really cool tool. So it's
Right.
something that the students are getting their feet wet with. And, you know, some of them have already jumped into the deep end and are just loving it. So it's a cool thing.
Awesome. Jim, I'll kick it back over to you.
Okay, so let's, you know, we're winding down here, and I'd like to end each of our sessions with some poetry or some inspiring words. So I asked Rob and Laate to read out some poetry that they like.
Who's going first?
Well, Laate,
Go for it, Rob.
whoever's ready first.
Rob, you already, so I made certain to stay clear of your quote, so go for it, man.
So mine is short, and I found it to be very in line with, you know, one of the messages that I hope to relay tonight. So it's a Shel Silverstein poem, and since I have 3 kids of my own, you know, it's of the right, you know, mental level for me. So all the woulda, coulda, shouldas laying in the sun, talking about the things they woulda, coulda, shoulda done. But all those woulda, coulda, shouldas all ran away and hid from one little did. So what I love about that is, in the design space is full of people talking about what you could do, what you should do, what you would do. But it's the person who acts, it's the person who goes out, makes something, tests it with somebody, and like pours their heart and soul into it, but like does it. They're the ones that really change the world.